Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants, my dear friends, my dear students. I feel very privileged to talk to you, and I hope that we are able to engage in a meaningful discussion today. And one of the purposes of this forum, which we have actually dubbed as Character Counts, is that we have an open dialogue, an open discussion without any inhibition, without any hesitancy on your part. And we are able to discuss all sorts of things that come to your mind and encourage this debate, encourage this discussion, so that a lot of things that today go on in the name of religion and society, of course, they are thrashed out. We are able to find out what the truth regarding them is, because as you would be knowing, living in various parts of the world, there are a lot of things which are culture or which have some historical background and may not have any significance as far as religion itself is concerned. So we need to understand religion, we need to understand our own relationship with our Creator in a manner that it is totally distanced and divorced from any concepts that are specifically area oriented or culture oriented. And again, one of the important things that I'd also like to point out here is that the purpose also is to encourage anything that comes to your mind and bring it into discussion. There is no such thing as a taboo question today or in all of our sessions, because the purpose is that we are able to discuss anything. It could be something very private, it could be something very blasphemous, so to speak. It could be something which comes to your mind and you're not very convinced about it, because you see, our purpose is to open this door which has remained locked for centuries. And what we find generally is that parents are not very conducive to discussion and dialogue, and teachers also. Of course, there are exceptions, but we would like to create another big exception on this forum, and we would like you to express whatever comes to your mind, and just don't think that anything will be judgmental or held judgmental against you. So the way I look at things here, or the way the format I have designed here, is that in order to focus your attention and in order to make you more concentrated, our short discussion in the beginning, I'll just raise a few pointers, will be of 4 segments. You must have received those 4 segments in your emails or in your WhatsApps, which basically are 4 titles of 4 segments, and the purpose is to just keep on shifting from one discussion to another discussion, so that things get along simultaneously in various aspects. So without any further ado, I now would take up the first segment of our youth forum, as I think we have aptly named it. So Character Counts. It's like a youth forum in which you can come and discuss anything that you'd like to. So the first thing that I would like to point out here, and perhaps which might be of interest to you, is that as individuals, as human beings, one of the greatest distinctions that we have as human beings is that we have the power to think. We can use our intellect, we can use our common sense, and we must realize that intellect and common sense is one of the greatest gifts of God. It tells us a lot of things. It tells us what we are. It tells us the right from wrong. Our own inner self is equipped to find out what right and wrong are, and that's something which we find in ourselves is called conscience. So conscience is something which tells you a lot. You don't need to go to any religious person to find out what right and wrong are, because God says that what righteousness and wrongdoing are, they are ingrained in human nature. They are innately found in yourselves. You know what right is, you know what wrong is, and when you do something wrong, you have that bad feeling in your conscience. So the purpose here is, as I said, is that we human beings have a very special ability that makes us or sets us apart from animals and other life forms, and that is the ability to think. And my first segment actually is directed towards this, that we should be thinking individuals. And when I take a look at the intellectual history of mankind, starting right from Adam and coming right up to us in this era, where it is estimated that about 7,000 or 6,000 years have passed in that, I find that one of the things that we need to understand is that we should divide our thinking ability into 3 broad parts. Our thinking ability or I would say into three phases. So the first is called reflective thinking. Reflective thinking means that whenever you get a certain data, you transfer it into your mind and you start thinking about it. When you're told something, that something is happening, you register it, you give it a thought. It's not that you just pass away over it. For example, events which are happening today in the world, we are passing through testing times because of this COVID, and we are witnessing that huge revolution against racism. So you see, these are pieces of data. They come and they stick together in our minds. And what we do is that we tend to reflect on them. And when we reflect on them, of course, certain questions arise: that why, how, why should this happen? Why is this cruelty going on? And why is it that God sends so much pestilence, so much earthquakes maybe, or tsunamis or Katrinas, which destroy everyone, or gives people this feeling that they are not being looked after? So, as I said, the first thing that should register in your minds whenever you witness something very different in your era is this reflective thinking. You reflect, you deliberate. This is the first step. And then the second step is what I call critical thinking, and which actually is the topic of this first segment. Critical thinking is that you analyze the data and you criticize it, and you would like to know the why and the how about it. So, for example, why does God do this? Is there a God? And we know that there is this suffering problem which has prompted many people who are atheists, many people who are agnostics, to disbelieve in God, or to think that there should be no God, because if there is a God and He's merciful, then where is He? Some years ago in Canada, we had a bushfire. This is about 4 or 5 years ago, and the animal population of that small forest actually was burnt to death. And one small deer survived. She lived for about 30 days and then she too expired. She was half burnt when she was discovered, and in 30 days she suffered a lot and then she expired. And the next day a tabloid or a newspaper ran this heading: "Is God dead?" So you see, when you see suffering, when you see people being not only killed, but killed in a merciless way, they are put to death in a way that we would shudder to imagine. People are burnt to death. They die of starvation. They die of poverty. They die of pestilence and disease. They die of famine. So you see, the second aspect that should come to your mind, or to every thinking mind, is why. Why does this happen? So whenever this question comes to your mind about anything, this means that you are a critical thinker. It means that you would like to find out the answers to whatever came into your mind. Remember, the first step was reflective thinking, in which you were plainly gathering data and trying to simulate it, trying to bring it together. And then the next step was that data bothered you so much, it worked so much passion in you, that you wanted to find out why is this thing happening? Why is God doing this? So that is what I call the second stage, in which you find out, or you try to find out, the answers to these very, very nagging questions. And hence you enter the realm of critical thinking. And then what you do is that you try to find out an answer. Maybe you get convinced from answers which are already floating around you. So you ask your father, you ask your mother, you maybe ask your teacher that why is this happening? Why so? Why is it that only poor people are being tested? Why is it that the rich, they just get away with a lot of things that they do? Similarly, if you look up at science, you'll see exactly the same pattern. Right from the early scientists, like for example Aristotle, and right up to Stephen Hawking today, you find a whole chain of scientists trying to solve the riddle of this universe. And again, the process is the same. They collected data of this universe, and they made it into a reflective data. They started to think about it, and then questions arose, and they started to criticize that. And we find that the initial concept of a geocentric universe, I'm sure you must be knowing this, that before Galileo and before Nicholas Copernicus, two of the very famous scientists who brought about this reformation in science, people believed, because of church and because of certain other reasons, that the earth was at the center of the universe, and the rest of the planets, or the rest of the heavenly bodies, they revolve around the earth. And that is why it's called the geocentric interpretation of the universe. Geo means earth, centric means in the center. So this is what we call as geocentric notion. When Galileo invented the telescope, and when Nicholas Copernicus, we know he was a monk, he actually through his telescope and through some of his calculations said it's the other way around. It's not that the earth is stationary, it is that the earth revolves around other planets. So he had to pass through testing times. Galileo had to go through a church inquisition, and he was forced to surrender his view. And he said that in spite of the fact that you have questioned the church's thinking, we would like you to give you a chance to repent. If you repent, your life will be saved, otherwise you'll be just put to death and executed. And he spent the last few years of his life in misery, because he had to give up his views and he wanted to save his life as well. But this was not the case with another scientist in Italy whose name was Bruno. And he said, I'm going to hold on to my view. Why is it that I should be persecuted? I have discovered something new. I have reflected, I have criticized, and I have come up with a new solution. And you know what? He was burnt at the stake. He was burnt alive. And only in the last century that people have started to honor his sacrifice for critical thinking, and have said that, okay, if you are a person who has gone to such an extent as to give up your life for this purpose, we will honor you for that. But that is, of course, a couple of hundred years after he had passed away. So just to give you this small window, that science also proceeds in exactly the same manner. It collects data, it criticizes it, forms a theory, then either that theory is corroborated, it's substantiated, or not, it is negated, and then we move on to another theory. And hence we see how Newtonian mechanics or Newtonian physics in science changed everything prior to its own era. And then later on, when Einstein, in the beginning of the last century, when he presented his special theory of relativity, we find how that totally and absolutely changed our view about the universe. And then very recently, Stephen Hawking, in his Brief History of Time and some of his other books, actually presented a new dimension, some of his new discoveries, and which specifically related to black holes. So you see, the progress of science is dependent on this process of critical thinking. Now, as I said, remember that we have 3 steps of thinking. One was reflective thinking, in which you just gather data and start thinking about it. The other is critical thinking, which we are just talking about, in which you analyze this data, you're not satisfied with some of the answers, you search for the answers, and what happens is that some of the prevailing answers satisfies you, and that's it. So you write that answer in your mind and you're satisfied. But then there's a third step, and that relates to issues in which you're not satisfied. I mean, maybe you have a lot of questions in mind, you started to gather that data, you reflected on it, you criticized it, you critically evaluated it, and none of the prevailing answers satisfied you. And you said, oh well, nothing doing, whatever you are saying or whatever I'm being told does not satisfy myself. Now comes the third part, and that is creative thinking. So what you do is, you present, or you try to present, your own solution to that problem. And from a reflective thinker to a critical thinker, you become a creative thinker. You now start to give a new dimension in life. And these thinkers that I just named for you, like the scientists, most of them passed through these stages, and they ultimately ended up in the third tier, which is the highest tier, in which they created something. When we say created, it means that they presented an alternative. They presented something new. They were not satisfied with the status quo, and they said that we would try and find out what the truth is. So we can see that this progress of human thought, it not only relates to religion, it also relates to science. In fact, to every step that we go through, we go through reflective thinking, we go through critical thinking, and ultimately we end up in that creative thinking mode by giving a new expression to the answers given earlier. So this is what I call this process of thinking, in which all of you as young people must immerse yourselves in. Don't take things for granted. Whenever your parents tell you something in the name of religion maybe, or in the name of society, or in any popular thing that goes on in the name of either science or religion, you must question it. If you question it, you'll find out that more often than not, a lot of things that are prevailing in the society, they have absolutely no basis, and they are merely popular beliefs that have been carried out or they have been carried down by our parents or by the society at large, and they have lacked this analysis. So if just one thing you are able to grasp from this first segment, that from today onwards, I am not going to take things for granted. I'm going to question everything. If my mom tells me to fast 30 days a year, a month in 1 year, I'll ask her why. Why did our religion tell us to fast? Why does it try to make us starve for, let's say, 16 or 17 hours? What's the point behind it? Why does God ask us to pray 5 times a day? I mean, once would have been enough. And why is it that we are told that we must eat halal food? Well, animal is an animal. We can just slaughter it in any way we would like. So you see, this is what belongs to the realm of religion. I highlight religion because you see, in other realms, in science, in social sciences, you are already a critical thinker, because the way those sciences are taught to you, they are taught in a critical fashion, and whenever you question it, it is encouraged and you get an answer, or maybe you go and research into it. But as far as religion is concerned, there is this huge lag in which this critical thinking element and this creative thinking element is missing. So my request to all of you would be that from today onwards, become alert. Anything which bothers you, anything which tells you that something is not right, which is being presented, I'm not going to accept it, or maybe I'm just going to put it through my lens of evaluation. I'm going to question it, and I'm only going to believe it if I am satisfied. And remember this, that what God has told us in the Quran, and His Prophet has also explained, that you would be answered, or you'll be held questionable. You'll be questioned for what you believe, not what people believe. So if you're not satisfied with certain things, and you would not, God will not accept this answer from you. Well, God, I did this because my mom said I should do this, or I did this because my dad said this. Because God is not going to accept your mom and dad's answer. He would like to know what you think, and why did you not act on your own thinking. So I bring a closure to my first segment, and I'll just pass on to the next segment. So just to make this note, that become critical thinkers. It's not that you should criticize for the sake of criticism. It's just that whenever there is a question in your mind, maybe it arises from in your own mind, and maybe it could be that other people raise this question to you. On both occasions, you should go and try to find out the answer, because you see, these answers one day would be asked by your own self, maybe by your own children when you grow up. So you are maybe adults, but maybe when you grow up, and today if you don't find your own parents in a position to answer your questions, so why not become those parents in future who are able to answer questions of your own children? And similarly, if you're living in the West maybe, or in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Australia, in the UK, in the US, you will have a lot of non-Muslim friends. So you should be in a position to talk to them. If they have a question about your religion, you should have a cogent answer. So this would help you to strengthen your belief and faith also, and also make you realize that a lot of things that have become famous in the name of religion, in fact, are not part of religion at all. They are more part of culture. So critical thinking, and nothing but critical thinking. And may God make you creative thinkers also, because creativity is a gift of God. Critical thinking is something that we all can do. So people who are painters among you, people who are singers among you, or people who are doing things, who composing themselves, that's another form of creativity. And that creativity is that you actually directly enter that realm of creativity, and you don't criticize previous thoughts, because creation and creativity is at times born without the first two processes as well. And that makes you a special talent. That would mean that you are presenting something out of your own mind, and hence if you polish that and you are able to go with that, you will become a really, really fantastic person. And remember, one of the targets that all of us should have is that when we leave this world, of course all of us have to, let's leave a mark on the people behind us. Let's make people think that such and such a person has passed away, and he or she will be remembered for these things that he or she did. So besides being critical thinkers and inshallah creative thinkers, also think about the fact that you're not going to spend an ordinary life in this world. It should not be something as we normally do, that we are born, we study, we hang out, we marry, we have children, we go for vacations, and that's the end of that. No, make a point And we'll talk about it, inshallah, in our later coming up sessions in the coming weeks, that how you can make yourself more effective as an individual and how you can contribute in the society. But for the moment, this is the end of the first segment, and now I'll take up the second segment. Should I take a short break if you have any questions, or should I just continue? Any suggestions?
I don't see any raised hand.
Okay.
So, just
okay. So, So our
go ahead, please.
second segment relates to God connection, how and why. So you see, this is another area that we need to understand very deeply. We have to mind ourselves. We have to think very deeply that we have not seen God. We don't at times feel His presence. We cannot smell Him. We cannot touch Him. So why is it that God is someone whom we should believe in, whom we should turn to for our prayers, whom we should acknowledge as our Creator? The only thing that we have seen around us at best, which can be a very, very small reflection of God, is our parents. They brought us into existence. They took care of us. They tended to us. They sacrificed themselves, and they furthered our ambitions. They made a lot of sacrifices just to make us grow. They provided for us even if they were not able to. They went to this length as to procure loans for us. They awoke the whole night so that we could sleep. So you see, we have someone in our lives which we can acknowledge as caretakers. So you see, what happens is that if you open your eyes to a larger canvas in which you just don't see your parents, but you see a whole bunch of mankind which has parents, who had more parents and parents and parents, and you see that there is a whole line of humanity which supersedes or succeeds each generation. And just as our parents are looking after ourselves, we find that there is another person or another being who is looking after not only our parents and the parents of our parents and so on and so forth. He is looking after whatever we find across us, around us. And remember, the things that we find around us, they are all of our own benefit. They are being put to use to our service. So you see, the sun does not rise for itself, or the moon does not set for itself, or the wind which blows is not for itself, or the water which flows in the seas is not for itself. It's doing a certain purpose. It's providing us. So one of the biggest signs to recognize God is that someone is, besides your parents, is taking care of you. How? So for the first thing that you can reflect is on your own human body. Your father and mother may have brought you into existence, but it was not that they were instrumental only in giving you this shape and form. Because when you become individuals, you find that there is a system in your body which is so vigilant, it is so punctual, and it has so many aspects that you are amazed. Just look at the eyes that you have. The amount of gratitude which comes to us when we open our eyes and we see the scenery around us, when we are able to see the people around us, it fills us with this gratitude. It tells us that eyes are perhaps one of the biggest favors of God, and it's not that our parents made them. It is as if saying that even our parents had eyes, and our parents had eyes, and so there must be someone other than our parents who made them and the eyes that they've got. So I would say that start off with your normal human body, and you'll find that the way God drenches you with His mercy and with His favors is immense. Try shutting down your eyes, closing your eyes, and then go about doing your routine work for maybe about 2 or 3 minutes, and you'll end up in frustration. You'll not be able to eat food. You'll not be able to change your clothes. You'll not be able to watch your TV or pick up your cell phone and dial it properly. Although I know that you are very efficient and you could dial it without seeing it, but still, you see, what happens is that eyes are one of the biggest favors of the Almighty. And you've got parents, you've got the best of living, you have got the best of clothes to wear, you go to the best of places for your education. And look at people who are living below the poverty line. Look at people who have to walk for miles to get pure potable water. Look at people who are handicapped. So you see, what happens is that if you compare what's going around your world, at the one end you see everything in service being put before you. You see the services of the sun, the moon, the star, the elements of nature for your own self. And on the other hand, you find your own self to be a miracle of human creation. And if this had happened, that you had been deprived of something, you would have been a person who would have missed out a lot of things in this world. If you would have been blind, or if you had been deaf or dumb, or lacking in any ability. So you see, it is here from these manifestations that you try to find out that there is someone who is running the affairs of this universe. There's someone who created your parents, whom you are able to see. And you see, one of the biggest things that human nature is very, very akin to is that we always thank God, or we always thank people who do favors to us, don't we? I mean, when one of your friends gives you a present or a gift, what's the instant reaction? You would like to return that gift. If he or she gave you something good, your instant reaction would be, well, I should come up with something even better, or at least something at par. So you see, instantly your emotions of gratitude arise in you because someone did a favor to you. So now imagine a whole world being present outside you, and it is as if someone is doing a favor to you. He is looking after you and doing all these things for you, providing you. Look at people around the world who are starving, who are not able to have their meals, who are not able to go living their normal routine in life, who don't have doctors to attend to, who fall sick, and because of very small diseases they die because there's no one to attend to them. So you see, this comparison makes you realize that someone is looking after you really well. And in spite of the fact that you may be deprived of certain blessings which other people have, you still have a lot to boast about. You still have so much from God. So the first thing to have that strong relationship with God is to thank Him for all these favors. So our realization of God comes through this gratitude, through this huge feeling that I'm being looked after, and I'm being looked after without my asking that person. So you see, you can see your parents looking after you, but you cannot see God if you look at the same way as you look towards your parents, because God is invisible. But the way He looks after you, it makes you feel that there's someone around me. And then another thing, at times you make dua, you make a prayer, you say, God, oh please grant me this wish. And lo and behold, it comes true at times. So again, this drenches you with these emotions of gratitude that someone is looking after me. I prayed to God to give me this, and immediately I got an answer. And then you find yourself that you are so helpless in certain things that only God is there to make His presence felt. And what better than that to realize than what we are seeing today. Look, in these times when we are going through this pandemic, isn't it that we find that God is expressing Himself much more perhaps than He did so in bits and pieces? We find the power of God, we find His self saying or trying to communicate something to us, as maybe we can discuss when you have questions. But you see, you feel the presence of someone else in your life. And that is how you have these mixed feelings of fear and hope, of gratitude and patience arise simultaneous in you. You feel grateful for what He does. You are patient for what you don't have, because you know that there are certain things that you have. So you show patience for that. You fear Him because you know that His might is so that He can just destroy things in a jiffy. And then you feel yourself so small, such a small speck in this universe, that you feel that you're nothing in front of that huge power. So this is how we connect ourselves to a God. And remember, the basic connection of God is not fear. It's not that, as generally God has been presented to us as someone who is like maybe someone who we should dread, who we should fear. No, that's not the case. What needs to be understood is that our basic relationship with God is through this gratitude, this feeling of connection. The stronger this connection, the farther that we can go. The stronger this connection, the more we will have this urge to do right, to forget about the wrong things, to do what is right, to do what our conscience thinks to be right. So this, I would say, is another segment or another part of this session that we have just started, as I'm going to end it here, that we have to have that God connection. If you have not discovered God, I mean, when I say not discovered God, you have discovered God or you've connected with God just because you've been born as Muslims. So undo that, because you see, you're now connecting to God directly. Previously, you were connecting to God indirectly. You believed in God because your parents told you that there is a God, or maybe the society told you there is a God. No, subtract that for some time. Start thinking yourself. Start thinking about the environment. Start thinking about the body that you have, the world around you, and how they perfectly match and make you realize that there is someone else. And so I'm not just listening to my mother or my father when I say there is a God. No, I'm listening to my own mind, my own heart, because I feel there is a God. So God should be your personal discovery. It should not be the discovery. I mean, you start off with your parents, that's understandable, but it should ultimately be your own discovery. So with this, I end my second segment, and I hope that I can continue with the third and the fourth, and then we'll have your questions, inshallah. So the third question, the third segment, if I remember, is does it relate to music or what?
It's about music.
So, okay. So you'll find this is a big jump. I mean, we were talking about critical thinking, we were talking about universe, we're talking about Einstein, we were talking about scholars, and we had then this thinking, this expansion in which we talked about God, and suddenly we are into another topic, which is, it seems very disjointed maybe to you, that how come music is now being discussed, and how come that we are now talking about mundane sort of a topic. Well, the reason that we are doing this is that, remember that I started off by saying that we have to be critical, we have to find out what the truth is, we should be seekers of the truth, and one of the areas in which our religion has been grossly misunderstood, or it needs this revaluation, this revisitation, this critical revaluation, is this area in which music, for example, is played on an instrument, or maybe you sing songs through it, or you are learning an instrument. But you see, you might have a different background, but generally you'll find many parents, they don't encourage music. They would not like you to become a professional musician. They will not like you to become a guitarist maybe. I'm just not saying that this is the case always, but most parents would, I mean, they would say that, well, you go on with your professional life, have a good degree, and you can do music as well as your part-time activity, and be careful, you might even come to know that music is haram, and so you might spoil your relationship with God as well. So you see, there are a number of things which we find out going on in our lives which relate to this perception that perhaps religion prohibits music, perhaps it's an evil thing, and perhaps when we sing or we are able to play an instrument, we are disobeying God in some way or the other, or there is something that is really bad. And so you see, what happens is that because this feeling to express ourselves in the form of songs, in the form of music, it naturally comes out of us. All of us are singers. We could be bathroom singers, but we still sing. I mean, you don't stop singing, because when you're happy, singing is something which comes naturally to you. And what happens is, because we have been generally told that singing is prohibited or music is prohibited, we have that feeling of guilt in us. We do sing at times, but we think, oh well, we're doing something bad, we're doing something wrong. So this prompted me to actually take you to this third segment. Of course, it's a big shift to our previous topics, but again, the reason being that one of the areas in which our younger generation feels that guilt, and at the same time still enjoys music, and at the same time at times it disregards religion. See, I have seen youngsters shy away from religion, shy away from God, merely because they are told that God is adverse to music, or our religion is adverse to music, and they say that, how can this be? How can a religion teach such a thing which comes so naturally to us? So that is why I've chosen this topic. And just to make this point I would underscore this point, and that is, if you read the Quran and if you read your history and hadith narratives, you'll find out that if you start off with the Quran, there is absolutely not a single verse in the Quran which says that music is prohibited. Not one. In fact, what we do see, on the other hand, is that the Prophet David, to whom was revealed the Psalms, a very, very beautiful book of hymns, he would recite that from his memory, and he would play the harp. He would play the harp and sing those hymns out to everyone. And we know from the Quran that the birds and the mountains and many other elements of nature, they would join his singing. So not only is there no prohibition in the Quran of any sort of music, we find on the other hand that a very, very famous prophet of God did so. And for example, if it was something that the Almighty did not have liked, he would have said, well, David is a singer, but I don't approve of singing. And God never said that. So you see, what happened is that not only did God not disapprove of David, he actually praised him for his this humility and the way he would sing these songs. So that takes care of the Quran. Now, as far as the Hadith is concerned, it is here that you'll find that there are certain narratives which do tell us that, for example, one of the narratives says that the Prophet is reported to have said that I have been sent in this world to break these musical instruments, or that he would say that music is something which is prohibited. Very few narratives are very, very soundly reported, but the ones that are, I've just recited them before you. Now, you see, one of the things that you need to understand while you're discussing Hadith and outside the Quran scenarios and outside the Quran literature is that you must gather all the texts on a particular topic and then see and collate it with the Quran and find out what's actually being said. So if you gather all the narratives in Hadith literature, you'll find out that it's not singing that is being prohibited or music which is being prohibited. What was happening in the times of the Prophet was that people would drink they would drink liquor, they would become inebriated, and songstresses and prostitutes and similar women would come and they would sing these songs, and they would not be wearing a proper dress, and they would create such gatherings which would have a lot of immorality about it. So it was to such gatherings that the Prophet said, while referring to these musical instruments, that for such areas I'm just going to break these instruments. Of course, these were not his exact words, these were reported. But the point that is being made is that it's not music that he was against. It was the aura which was being created, because music was generally being played in gatherings in which we had this extreme immorality in them, that the Prophet said this. And when we go deeper, we'll find out that as far as music is concerned, we know that there were two girls actually in one of the Eid days singing in front of the Prophet. And Abu Bakr radiallahu, who was a companion of the Prophet, he came into the Prophet's presence and said that he actually asked Aisha, his daughter, that why is that these girls are singing these songs in front of the Prophet, and it is not proper. And the Prophet had actually taken his side was on this side, and the girl was singing on this side. He was just lying down on the bed. He turned around and said, Abu Bakr, leave them. It's their day of Eid. Let them enjoy. Let them do what they are doing. So you see, not only we don't find any prohibition in the Quran, not only there are certain narratives which speak otherwise, we find that the Prophet himself at times listening to them or listening to emotions which were purely expressed. So if we gather all this data, and I've written about this and lectured about that, maybe you can just see, I'm just making a short presentation here, you'll find out that what actually comes to light is that the content of music is something that must not be vulgar, it must not be immoral. As far as if that is taken care of, singing songs, playing music, playing instruments is perfectly okay. You can even adopt music as a profession. You can go on and become a maestro. You can become a Mozart or a Beethoven or a Paganini. So you see, the bottom line here is our religion, and every divine religion wants us to be pure from inside. It wants us that we should not tarnish the image of our souls, the mirror of our souls. And when we indulge in any vulgarity, any immorality, it takes us away from the realities of life. It takes us away from God. So what I can say while summing up my view here is that it's not music which is prohibited or not songs which are prohibited. It is only if we use music and songs for immorality or for content which has something immorality. Now, if you ask me what exactly is immorality, you don't need to, because you see, everyone knows what immorality is, what things which are expressed in a way are best done if they are done in private. When you express certain things in open, even though they are very, very acknowledged facts, you see what you do is you do something which is outrageous at times, or it is not. What we say is it's inappropriate to do it in maybe in a gathering or something. But just to let you know that as far as music is concerned, as far as singing is concerned, as long as you don't indulge in content which is either maybe polytheistic in nature, as you would know that there are certain qawwalis, if you know this sinf or this genre of music in which these Muslim saints, as they used to sing, they have a lot of qawwalis. A qawwali is a very powerful instrument, and if you hear it, you really feel ecstatic. But a lot of these qawwalis, if you just reflect on their meaning, on the lines that they say, they are polytheistic in nature. The very famous qawwali Tajdar-e Haram, it's sung by the Coke Studio, it's sung by so many other people, and you really marvel at the way it has been sung. But just see what it says, and you'll get to realize, well, it is saying something. It is granting the Prophet of God the same authority as God himself. And this is inappropriate. So one thing is that the content should not be either projecting the Prophet in a way as is done in the qawwalis beyond his own status, or the content should not be vulgar or immoral or indecent. So as long as these things are taken care of, using music to your advantage, using music for creativity, using music as a profession, there is absolutely nothing wrong with it. And you must, if you are, encourage yourself that if you're a good bathroom singer, develop your songs, make yourself more proficient in singing, learn some instruments, and express yourself, because this in itself is creativity. So with this we end our third segment. And the fourth and final segment, viewers, I think I've just taken a little more time. This was because of our first introduction of our session. I'll be more brief in my final segment. And this final segment, of course, is something that all of us now are passing through. These COVID times, these times in which we are just on the stage of this world when this big pandemic is happening. We cannot help it. We cannot just pass through it without in some form or the other exposing ourselves to it. So what can be done and how can be done? See, the first thing regarding these COVID times is that whenever you feel something out of the ordinary, whenever you think that something is happening out of the ordinary, do think that it could be a blessing in disguise. There are so many things which happen in this world. They seem so disastrous. They seem so devastating that we think that, well, how could this have happened? Why is this happening? But you see, what happens is that many a time there is this positive thing which is always bracketed with a lot of negative things. We know that there are people who are dying. We know that this suffering is not going to end very soon. It might continue for a couple of years. We know that we are being grounded in our houses. We are house arrested. We cannot go to the parks so freely as we used to go there. And so there is it's like a control alt delete button which the Almighty has pressed. He is perhaps resetting this computer of the universe, and we are now passing through new times. So consider it as an opportunity for you to do a lot of things which you perhaps were missing in your previous times. You must, of course, create awareness. You must be very careful. You must listen to what the doctors say at all times. That is a given. I'm not even going to speak about it, because as all individuals who have a lot of common sense, who have a lot of sensitivity towards their neighbors and their fellow human beings, this goes without saying that you have to exercise a lot of care. But what I would like to say here today is that this COVID issue has given you a host of new opportunity. It has given you a lot of time. It has made you people who can now reflect, who can now soul search, who can now indulge in things which, because of the fast routine in life of these pre-COVID times, you never had the chance. Now you have the chance to think a lot. You can do a lot of things. So please make a list of things that you can do. And as I said, I'll start off by saying that learn a musical instrument if you can. If you are able to lay your hands on a musical instrument, do so. You don't need to go to a teacher to learn music. We have so many apps in our computers and in our phones. which we can just use to our advantage, and we can learn a musical instrument. My own nephew is learning piano through an app which is called Simply Piano. And there is, and I'm sure there are other ones which is like Simply Guitars or Simply organs or forever. I used to play the violin very early in my life, just about 40 years ago. And then because of my pursuits and because of the fact that the violin takes up a lot of time because you need a lot of practice, so I gave it up. I restarted about 10 years ago, again when I had some time. But then again I had to give it up because as you say that practicing the violin at a certain, in every day, it needs about 2 hours every day, which I couldn't afford. So I would have loved to play the violin still in my life today had I had the opportunity and time. And I'm waiting for paradise. If I'm able to get there, the first thing that I'll do is pick up a violin and pick up and start doing what I wanted to do a lot. So the first thing is that do make yourself comfortable with a musical instrument. It's really going to help. It is going to bring out that creativity in you, which I just talked about. It's not that all of you should do this. I'm talking about to those of you who would like to learn music, who would like to learn an instrument. This is the time, and it's going to give you a lot of opportunity. And try to perfect yourself. And then another suggestion: learn a new language. You see, all of us know a certain set of languages. Maybe you know English, maybe you know French, you know Urdu. So these are the languages you already know. But again, you have so many beautiful apps like the Lingua app. I'm sure you must be aware of that. You can learn new languages while sitting at home and practicing. You can learn Chinese, you can learn Japanese, Mandarin, you can learn German, French, Latin, Greek, although Latin and Greek are no longer in use that much. But for those of you who would like some academic study, there's a whole vast area in which you can do it, and it's for free. I remember when I used to play the violin many years ago, it was a very expensive instrument, and I had a teacher whom I had to pay through my nose. He was very expensive. And if today I pick up the violin, I don't need to go to any teacher because it's all available in my cell phone. I'm just going to do that. So make this an opportunity. Turn this thing into an opportunity for you. It's a distressing time, but you can convert that distressing time to your own advantage by, as I said, learning language, learning a new instrument. And these are just 2 examples that I gave. I am sure that there are so many things which involve creativity. It's like maybe gardening, it could be painting, it could be things that you would like to do, it could be meditation, it could be yoga, it could be exercise, it could be workout. So you see, it's just a question of switching gears and using this time to the best of your ability. And why do I say this? Because you see, my dear friends, you see the biggest money or the biggest investment that you have is time. Time is something which, if you use it properly, if you use it to your advantage, you can simply turn nothingness into a lot of things. You can create from nothingness. Because you see, at times when we have a lot of time at our disposal, we fail to realize that, and we start procrastinating or we start wasting time. So that's another thing that you have to learn from this COVID, that time you have a lot and time you must consume in the best of your pursuits. And this does not mean that you must not entertain yourselves. Do so. Make yourselves comfortable. Go for those exercises. Play games. Play outdoor. If outdoor games are not possible, play indoor games. Whatever. But other than that, make constructive use of your time. And there are so many activities that you can really do. And even after doing them, you'll still have time to do some more. So create awareness, follow the doctor's advice at all times, whatever they say, because times change every day. New information is coming in over every minute or by the second even. And then use this time to your advantage and make yourself a person, as I said very earlier on, and we started off my talk, that when you leave this world, because all of us have to leave this world, we must leave our mark. We must stamp our mark on this world, and people should remember us by what we did, what we stood for, and what we presented ourselves and the way that we conducted ourselves. So with this I come to an end to this first session. I hope I was able to communicate some of the things to you. So I am now available for any questions, and the fun part is now starting. The boring part has now ended. And remember, You can ask any question. You can ask these questions the topics that we had discussed today, without any inhibition, without any hesitancy, and just shoot whatever comes to your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. So far, I don't see any raised hands, but I have a question coming online. I'll go ahead and ask that, and then I'll start taking questions from the Zoom session. So the question is, how can we distinguish between one's conscious will and role of fate? In majority of things, we find conscious responsible. Fate is restricted to where we will be born, religion, and mode of living. What about other acts of life? Are they dependent on conscious will or fate?
Well, I just change this question slightly, and I think what you're talking about is more of conscience, if not conscious will, and what we are given from God. So these are two distinct areas. Conscience means something which every human being has, regardless of his religion or her religion. She or he could be an atheist or an agnostic or a Muslim or a Sikh or a Hindu or a Buddhist or a Jew or a Christian, anyone. But this is something which all human beings have in common, and that is conscience. That is the basic sense of what right and wrong are. No one in the world would say that justice is a bad thing or speaking the truth is something which we should not do. There are very few exceptions, but as I said, that your innate guidance, your inborn guidance, your conscience is something which is common to every single human being on earth. As far as faith is concerned, so you see, if you divide this guidance into two parts, one is the guidance God has given you at your birth, which is your intuition, your own human faculty in which you can distinguish from right from wrong. And then there is another guidance which God has given to you, which we can call as revealed guidance. So one was that inherent guidance which we already had at birth, which every single human being had, and the other is revealed guidance, which means that God has given you that guidance, and that guidance is over and above that innate guidance. For example, one of the topics of that revealed guidance is that how can we connect to God? What is our relationship with God? How can we express it? Our innate guidance was insufficient to guide us as to how we can connect to God. So you see, what happens is that wherever that innate guidance falls short of guiding us, in that particular area, we find the interference or the addition of that divine guidance. So divine guidance is something which complements that inner guidance, inherent guidance. And that is how we should take it. And that is why I also say this, that there are very few areas in which we need divine guidance. I mean, when I say this very few areas, I mean compared to the areas that we have in our inherent self. That is such a vast scope that maybe 80% of humanity is united in that, and it's just the 20% in which the revealed guidance comes and complements and tells you more about certain things which your inherent guidance was incapable of discovering for itself.
Thank you. I have a question from Hamza Ahmed Ranja. Please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask the question.
Yes, sir. So I have a question regarding the zabiha. That in Islam it is taught us to slaughter the animals in a particular way, and in the modern times we have other ways in which we can take lives of animals by giving them electric shock or giving them some medicine in which they can face less pain. So why is that we are still sticking to that old method of just cutting their throat and waiting the animal to die?
Right. So you see, this is a very interesting question, and I'm sure people who live around the world, they have this in mind, that why is it that we are asked to eat halal food and food or animals which are slaughtered in a very particular way, and most of the McDonald's and KFCs and the burgers that we find around ourselves they are not halal, or at least our parents tell them that they are not halal. So you see, just let me elaborate on this a little, because this is a very important aspect of our public life, and of course one of the greatest enjoyments that we have when we get together is to eat. And to eat or not to eat is again the question that we need to address, what to eat and what not to eat. So as far as halal food is concerned, you see, there are two concerns which the Almighty has brought forward. One is that whatever we eat is something is going to affect our habits. Is something which the food that we eat, it does affect our own character, and it affects our own personal life. And that is why we don't eat beasts generally like lions and tigers, because we know that these lions and tigers, they are savage beasts, they are savage animals. And what happens is if you start eating these beasts, that savagery is transferred to you as well, and you become aggressive, you become very cranky, you have a lot of anger in you, you turn out to be rioters, you turn out to be extremists, etc. So by taking this analogy a little further, what the Almighty wants us is that we should not drink the blood of an animal or take the animal or consume an animal which has blood stuck in its veins. Because you see, when you slaughter an animal and you don't do it in a way that the blood is totally drained out, that blood remains in the arteries and veins of that animal, and when you try to eat it, it's very difficult to separate a lot of blood. It comes with the meat and you start consuming it. So one concern of the Almighty is that because of the fact that if we start consuming blood, we'll have the same savagery which of course consuming blood would make us into. So he has told us that we should leave such beasts or leave such food which has that element of savagery. Now if we don't slaughter an animal such that all the blood drains away, it could be any method. The fact is that that blood will get stuck in the veins and the arteries, and it will ultimately go to our stomach, and we will eat and consume that and hence be affected from its influence. So the method that our religion has taught us is that blood should be drained away as much as possible, and for this you cut the jugular vein, which is the carotid artery in your neck, and that makes the blood just flow away. If we stun that animal, for example, what happens is the animal dies immediately and the blood is stuck up in the veins. It is still there in the veins and it is difficult to separate it, and more often than not it comes and you have to eat it with food. So one of the reasons or one of the conditions of halal food is that halal food must be or halal animals or animals which are deemed to be halal should be slaughtered in a way that the blood completely drains out. Otherwise you will of course have the same habits or close to those habits as savage beasts would have, and any other way which can drain out the blood can be adopted. As we can see today, machines are doing this. For example, you have those animals pass through a ring in which they are tied up, and the machine just cuts the jugular vein and the blood is drained out. So anything can be used. It's not just manually that you can slaughter, it could be through machines as well. The second condition for a halal slaughter is that you should take the name of God before slaughtering it. And why? This is extremely important to understand, and I think you would be in a better position to understand that why we don't eat animals which are not slaughtered in the name of God. Now please do listen to this very carefully. You see, to God, human life, I'm talking about animal life, I'm talking about human life. Human life is absolutely sanctified. It's sacred. You cannot take the life of a human being. Of course, if that has to be taken, it has to be taken by the state. If that person is guilty of murder or maybe some other crime. Other than that, you don't have any business to touch a person. In order to make this sanctity of human life stand out, you know what the Almighty has done? He says you cannot even take animal life, which is less than human life, unless I permit you. Understand? You see, basically it was to protect human life. The Almighty wanted the sanctity of human life in you, and He wanted to make you realize that human life must not be touched. So for this, what He did, He stepped down one step and said, okay, human life cannot even be touched. What to speak of human life? Even lesser life forms like for example goats or camels, which are animals which are not humans, even they cannot be touched because they have life. Yes, you can touch them if you get my permission, because I have made them for you. But if you don't get my permission, even those lesser life forms which are animals cannot be consumed, because it is me who gives life, and it is with my permission that you can take it away. So when we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, which is the takbir, the standard form, we are actually using that permission from the Almighty to take a life. And believe me, if I had not been given this privilege or this permission, I for one would have been a vegetarian. I would not have gone and slaughtered a goat or a camel or a sheep for my own pleasure, because I would have thought that why should I take a life, even if it is of an animal, for my own pleasure. It is this courage which the Quran has given us by saying that okay, you can you are permitted to take the life of an animal, but with the permission of God, and that would be that you have to exercise this takbir by saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar. So these are the two conditions. And when you eat an animal which has not been slaughtered by saying Bismillah Allahu Akbar, you are actually not authorized to take the life of that animal. And as I said earlier on, the bottom line or the purpose was to protect human life. Because you see, when something above that smaller or lesser form is to be protected, then things which come before it, they need even more protection. Because if you stop way before that real prohibition, you will never come near that. So God actually wanted people should not come near human life, and for that they said that what to speak of human life, you cannot even take animal life unless I give permission. So this is the philosophy behind taking the lives of an animal for slaughter. It has to be in a way that blood is drained out, so that we don't get influenced by those beastly habits. And secondly, we must take the name of God, because that is the way that we have permission to take life. If we don't take the name of God, we are not authorized. We don't have the authority to take an animal life. And hence we have to mind this. We have to be very careful that animals, they are also living beings, although they have been created for us, but that creation for us can only be utilized if we ask God's permission.
Thank you, sir. The next question is asked that you in the first segment said that we should raise questions to clear our misunderstandings.
Right.
But what we see that in society, and our parents do not encourage us to do so. Can we stand against them, and how should we do it then?
Again, that's a very good question. You see, you are absolutely right that the society that we live in, our parents, they are not very encouraging towards questions that we have. The only thing is that you try to find out the answer to a question yourself. If your parents are not very well equipped, you don't have to turn to them always. For example, you people are maybe studying physics, maybe you're studying medicine, you're doctors. So it's not that all of the questions are answered by your parents. You need specialists for that subject. So if your parents are not conducive to your answering, you can do some research yourself and find out those answers and have them verified. But don't stop those questions to arise in your mind, because you see, that is the gateway to knowledge. Remember, questions can lead you to new knowledge, to new facts, to new revelations. You'll be surprised that at times we don't ask questions because we think that our peers would make this comment, oh, what a stupid question she's asking or he's asking. And without realizing that every person might be having the same question in the mind. And it's just the first person who takes that first step or breaks the ice in asking that question, that at times the answer given becomes a revelation for the whole class or for a bunch of people. So question is something that we do, of course, find ourselves being discouraged. But again, we have to find our own way. Our parents did their best to raise us. They have given us this mental ability. They have nurtured us. Now let's take it upon ourselves as well. Let's not leave everything to our parents. So, and if we find something which is against the views of our parents, or we start practicing that, we have to be polite. We have to tell them that, well, this is how I have seen, I have studied, and this is how I make out the correct thing, and I intend to follow it. Don't be harsh. Don't be rude. You can still do what you like, being polite. Remember, the biggest thing that you can do to counter a harsh parent is politeness. Do what you think is right. Don't follow their advice if you think that's not correct, but be polite. Be soft. Don't talk back. Just politely smile and do what comes to your mind. This will make them realize that you are serious, you would like to follow what you think, but at the same time, you're not rude also.
The next question is again about music, and it says that if you learn an instrument, is it okay to post it on social media?
Of course.
Should we strictly,
you see, when you're learning something, when you learn something, maybe it could be as a profession, it could be as a hobby, you have all the right to do so. As long as you take care of certain parameters. For example, it should not, as I said earlier on, it should not be vulgar, the content should be very civilized, should be decent. Singing a song or playing music, it's absolutely fine. As I said, that these are in our own scientific terminology, what we call them, they are fine arts. So there are arts and there are fine arts. How do we differentiate between arts and fine arts? So the fine arts are arts which appeal to our subtle emotions. They are very subtle. They are things which make us feel without expression. They are things which make us realize without being communicated the words. So these are what are called fine arts, and all of them are absolutely allowed. And the Prophet Umar, we know, the Caliph Umar in his own times, he used to listen. In their times, one of the biggest entertainments was to listen to the poetry of people. The poetry would be sung, the poetry would be recited out, and some of our caliphs would actually call people and have them recite this poetry out of their memory, and they would do so and they would enjoy these gatherings. So I think that as long as you do it in limits, as long as you do it in a decent way, I would say that even your parents might not object. But yes, you can post them on social media, and yes, you can take them up as a profession.
Thank you. Next question is by Naima. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, like, for example, like, there's a sauce called velouté, and people use wine in order to cook, and the alcohol does cook off, and you can't get intoxicated by it, and that is why alcohol is haram, that you shouldn't, get intoxicated. So I was just going to ask, using indirect methods to reach the purpose of why something is not allowed, does that make it halal then?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get your point because the voice was very gentle. Could you just repeat it, or maybe Ghazal, can you just summarize what she's just asked?
What I got is she's concerned about when we cook different Italian foods and things like that. So in restaurants and as well as home, sometimes we put alcohol content to the sauces. Is it okay or not?
Well, if you know that there is alcoholic content in it, then you should try to ignore that. You should not use it, because if there is alcohol, then of course, even if it is in a very small quantity, you should not go near it, because as you can see that things which are prohibited, we have to stay back from them, even if they don't cause that inebriation, because you see, you never know when you can just cross the line. And just to give you this small more explanation, I mean, something which happened recently in Pakistan can maybe open up your eyes that why is it that Islam says that we cannot consume alcohol even if we do it in a very small amount, which would not inebriate us, which would not intoxicate us. After all, intoxication is the real thing. So Islam could have allowed us to drink a little bit of liquor or a small amount of liquor in which we don't get intoxicated, and at the same time still enjoy liquor. You see what human psyche is, and what of course God has made, the way God has made us is that we tend to be very precautionary in matters which can lead to grave issues. You know what happened in Pakistan in that famous air crash which just occurred about a couple of weeks ago? You must be knowing that the plane crashed in a populated area. There was a colony, a residential area in which the plane had crashed. Why? Because they had violated a very basic fundamental principle, and that was that the runway must be clear of any population for a certain number of miles. The covered area of the airport, or the area in which the runway starts, has to be at a certain distance from residential areas, and that was not taken care of, and people started building their houses. And this might have never happened, that an aircraft would have landed, and in maybe in 99% occasions, on 99% occasions, it would have landed on the airstrip, and it would not have crashed or gone off the airway or the runway and smashed into those houses. But because of that one small mistake, it became a huge mistake. And the precaution that was needed at that time was that a big area should have been left vacant, so that if there is a possibility for an aircraft to waver from its track, it could have been given that opportunity and still no casualties would have arisen. But that precaution was not taken, it was thrown to the winds. So what happens is that at times, things which can result in grave consequences, the line to reach them is drawn much earlier. In Italy we have that famous mountain Vesuvius, which erupts at times and it doesn't. And then there are other volcanoes also. But you see, the general rule is that in volcanic areas, you must not have population. But in spite of that, in California, in some parts of California, and some other earthquake belts, people don't listen. And in spite of the fact that that earthquake might not even happen for centuries, but when it does, it causes huge devastation. So what we do is that even if the chance of something going wrong is maybe 0.01%, we don't take that, because human life is so dear to us. So what we do is we design airports, we design cities so that they are far away from volcanoes, far away from residential areas, so that nothing untoward happens, even if the chance is very, very little, very remote, 0.01%. So this is the analogy that I wanted to draw your attention to. In a very similar way, drinking alcohol in a very small quantity might never affect you. If you keep on drinking it all your life, it would not affect you at all, because it doesn't. It only affects you when you consume it in a certain quantity. But you see, what happens is that it could happen that maybe once in a while you cross the limit simply because you're enjoying that intoxication, or maybe you're not getting that intoxication and you are thrilled with the fact that you would like to just add one more sip, so that you can enjoy, or you could find out what other people are feeling. So things in which grave consequences result, the method of our religion is that it puts the prohibition much or well beyond or well before the actual thing, so that people are not able to cross over into that thing. So that is why we say that even a small quantity of alcohol should not be consumed, even though that small quantity is not going to inebriate, because you never know when that small quantity is going to turn into a bigger quantity, and so on and so forth, and you will ultimately end up as a person who starts drinking in the formal sense.
Thank you. Next question is from Aisha Zia. Can you please unmute yourself and ask the question?
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sir, you mentioned in the first segment that we shouldn't believe anything unless we are satisfied with it. But aren't our satisfactions very individualistic to us, meaning they are molded by our desires and past experiences? And from what I know personally is that religion, a very intrinsic part of faith is to put your own satisfactions to the side.
Right.
And you know how the Quran says about the believers that they hear and then they obey. And to further elaborate, I would like to give you an example. For instance, it doesn't personally satisfy me that the general consensus on keeping dogs in the house is that you shouldn't, because no angels come in the house then. But that is the mass consensus in the theological community. So where do you draw the line and stuff like this?
So that's a wonderful question, Aisha. Thank you for asking this question. So what we'll do is I'm going to make a discussion in our coming weeks regarding whether dogs are prohibited or not, whether you can keep them or not. So that's a separate thing. But other than that, your real question, which has come to your mind, is absolutely right. It's a very valid point. Just one thing that I'd like to emphasize here is that I never said that you believe once you're satisfied. What I meant to say, if I was not clear, let me clarify it again, that you start off with a certain set of beliefs that you inherit from your parents, which are going around in the society. It's not that you're going to reinvent the wheel, or you're going to do a research in every matter and then do so. No, you start off with whatever you find your parents telling you, and then you start questioning them, maybe. Or if it's not that you always question them, at times questions come to your mind. For example, you could ask your parent that, well, Baba, you tell me that I should have halal meat. Why is it that I am supposed to have halal meat? So you see, it's not that you should start off with that research. It's that you start off with what your parents tell you. But if there is a question which comes to your mind, or if someone else poses that question, then you start evaluating, and then you start that process which I call as rediscovering. Because when you rediscover, what you're doing is you are unlearning certain things that you were passed on by your parents, and now you're trying to find out that whether what your parents said, or maybe your teachers said, or your friends said, is really something. Is it true, or is it a myth, or is it something which is just a popular misconception? So it's not that I said that you start off with every single question in your mind and start a research as soon as you grow up. No, you start off in a normal way. Just keep your eyes and ears open. Whenever you have a question, don't lull it to sleep. Ask that question, research that question, and you know what? In a couple of years, you will find that Islam or the directives of Islam have become your own discovery, because you have found them out once you had already inherited those directives or those precepts from your society. So it's like learning through experience, learning through previous data that has been fed into you, and then you start analyzing it as soon as you find that either you're not satisfied with the answer, or you are what is happening is that maybe something is wrong and your common sense says something else, and for example a hadith says something else. And just to let you know that our Prophet once said that if someone tells me, someone tells you on my behalf, on the Prophet's behalf, that you do such and such a thing, and when you hear that person, you find that your conscience is puzzled, or maybe your hairs stand at end, or you find that this is something is very alien in nature, very strange. Well, you know what he said? He said, then this is sufficient proof to tell you that I never said that, because what I say is so close to human nature that it's not going to make you make your hair rise on end. So that is something that inshallah we'll discover maybe next week or discuss next week. You've raised a very valid question. The keeping of pets, especially dogs in our houses and in our precincts that we live, we'll deal with that in a different session. But for your answer, as I said, that it's not that you have to wake up in space and start researching. It's just that you have to pass through this process whenever there is a question, and keep on building on that knowledge that you inherited from your parents. At times you'll ratify it. It's not that at all times you're going to negate it. Many a time, in fact most of the time, it would have been correct, because what your parents are telling you is generally what they have heard from their own parents, and it's generally correct. But because what has happened to Islam in the last 1,000 years is that people have stopped thinking, they have stopped using their common sense, and Islam is being communicated not through reasoning but through emotions. And hence what has happened is that a lot of things which needed revisitation, which needed to be differentiated, whether they are culture or religion or not, they are still mixed up and found in the corpus of religion. So that's a special case that we are facing today. Other than that, I think I have endeavored to answer your question, and if you have any further comment or question, I'd be glad to go through it as well.
Thank you, sir.
Next in queue is Zaki Zubairi. Please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sir, you spoke about the human body,
Mm-hmm.
and I found that like many scientists, particularly the atheists,
Mm-hmm.
they argue that like the thousands of years of evolution, like they already explained the intricate design of the human body by itself. And so I just want to get your perspective on evolution in Islam.
Right. You see, if the theory of evolution, although it's so popular still amongst the masses, at the intellectual level and at the academic level and at the level in which it was put forth, there are serious questions which have arisen, which have doubted this whole theory. Especially that missing link thing, is there are a lot of things which that theory does not answer correctly, in which the transition from an ape to a male or to a human being or to a Homo sapien is correctly underscored. You can read a lot of material on the internet which critiques this theory of evolution. The Quran does not go by it, although the Quran does support evolution in a different way. It says that human beings themselves evolved from a lower life form themselves, but they were always human. In their own human capacity, they became better humans, so to speak, and ultimately the first perfect human being was Adam and Eve, who were chosen as the first parents of our human family. So the Quran does believe in evolution, but that evolution is within the human sphere. The primates were human themselves, and then they developed into perfect humans. Other than that, the theory of evolution as put forth by Darwin, as I said, is itself now in its doldrums. It has seen its heyday, and now it's on the decline. But you see, what happens is that things which have persisted for a long time, they take a long time to go away, even if they have been refuted at the academic level. That academic level refutation is now going to slowly maybe infiltrate and become more common. And at the same time, we still have proponents of Darwinian evolution. We know that there are people who are atheists. We know that a person like Richard Dawkins, we know that Sam Harris and some of the others are still advocating a lot of things which Darwin had said. But if you read it yourself, you'll find out that this theory now has been very convincingly refuted.
Thank you.
Hassan, please go ahead and ask your question and unmute yourself.
Assalamu alaikum.
Ji walaikum assalam.
My question is related to the first segment, and I want to ask that in the Battle of Badr, why did Allah have to send 1,000 angels in order to aid Muslims against the disbelievers? We all know that Muslims were 313 in number, and the disbelievers were, say, 1,000. So if 1,000 angels are added to 303 Muslims, they become 13 and 13, and disbelievers being outnumbered as only 1,000. But still Muslims had to suffer the lives of 14 companions of the Prophet of Allah. I mean to ask that we know that an angel cannot be killed. Even Azrael is an angel of Allah and can take the lives of all the 7.5 billion people on the earth. Then why did Allah have to send 1,000 angels? Only one angel can destroy all the disbelievers in a matter of seconds. Why did there was a need of 1,000 angels? Can you please answer?
Well, this question can be extended to the fact that why does God have so many angels to his service? He could have just Gabriel to his service. He didn't need Michael. He did not need Raphael, some of the other angels. So you see, what you need to understand is that God has put forth a certain scheme. I mean, when you meet God, you can of course ask him that why is it that you hired the services of so many angels? One could have been enough. But the way God is administering this universe is that he has divided the tasks, so to speak. It's like deputing his tasks to various beings and telling them that you are assigned this task and you are assigned this task. He could have made no angel at all, so to speak. Even one angel would not have been essential, because God could have just had them killed. The disbelievers could have been drowned. They could have been wrecked with an earthquake. So even one angel was not necessary. But you see, the scheme of God is that he created angels for various purposes. He assigned them various tasks. And one of the reasons of polytheism or shirk is that people started to believe that these angels, especially the idolaters of Arabia, their belief was that these angels are daughters of God, and they created their idols and statues at various places. And the Quran mentions them, the Lat, Manat, Uzza, for example. There were 3 statues of deities which were constructed, and they were actually worshipped. So you see, the science of how God governs his universe is something which he has devised. We can try to understand it, and we can try to comprehend it, but of course we cannot have a total grasp of it, because this is how God works. There are a number of things that he has not disclosed to us, and he could have we have that question. For example, even a more basic question is that why did God need to create us in the first place? I mean, he never asked us. And why is it that if he already knows the answer, that where are we going to land ultimately, why did he create us? So you see, there are so many questions that arise. Some we have an answer to, some we would look forward to the day of judgment to ask him for that answer. But one important need with angels do fulfill is that God does not communicate at all times directly with his prophets. He does so, like for example he did with Moses, but many a time he uses those angels to communicate his message, to bring revelation, to bring wahi to his prophets. So one of the reasons is that God himself is made of such material, if I can say so, that he cannot directly expose himself to human beings, because they would not be able to stand his appearance, as was the case with Prophet Moses. So he uses an intermediate medium in order to communicate his directives and in order to do some of his tasks. This is how I understand it, and of course this is an insufficient answer. A complete answer I can only imagine, and I have this question as well, and a lot of other questions which relate to how and why God is doing such and such things, but perhaps they would be best answered if we had God here in the class, which we don't, unfortunately.
Thank you very much.
The last question of the session is by Zain Malik. So Zain, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum salam.
I had a question regarding hadith.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do we determine the legitimacy of hadith? Because they're not in the Quran, and well, they're transmitted through the word of mouth, and well, we know humans aren't perfect, so they might forget certain things, and even changing those a little can have a big impact on something that is used extensively by a lot of scholars.
So actually, this answer requires a lot of detail, and I have talked about it in many of my articles and also in some of our lectures. Maybe Ghazal can help you out in finding those. I think answering it here would consume a lot of time. But just to give you a very brief introduction is that we judge hadith by natural principles of historical criticism. With these hadiths were never ever advertised by the Prophet to have them transferred. It was just the sweet will of the people who heard them, that they wanted other people to benefit from them. So in other words, the transmission of hadith was never the Prophet's own mission. He never said that what I am telling you, please go and communicate to other people. He never said that. What he did was that he answered questions, he said certain things, and people out of their own will thought that they've heard something very wise, and so let us tell others as well. And hence we find people narrating what the Prophet said, and then other people narrating, and then we have various steps. So there are tools of historical criticism which are used. For example, people who were transmitting, did they hear that Prophet properly or not? Did other people make a different assessment of the same conversation, or was it a corroboratory assessment? Was that person really present in the time of the Prophet that he is saying, or maybe he was doing it later? Did he directly hear it from the Prophet, or did he hear it from someone else and then said that I heard it from the Prophet? So these are some of the areas in which we investigate our hadith, and once we are convinced, or relatively convinced of its authenticity, only then do we start understanding it. And a lot of our hadiths are there which have a lot of wisdom in them, which have a lot of things in which explain at times the prophetic wisdom, and we thus benefit from them. But again, after putting them through a lot of scrutiny, that we do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. This was our last question, and we are just right on time, so we can conclude our session for the day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Hope you had a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.